What's up, everyone? We're here for another episode of Locked On Bucks as we start to move towards Bucks and Nets on Thursday night. But I can't move forward without still looking back at this Giannis performance against Philly. We've got a bunch of numbers. We're going to talk Giannis from the top. This guy just continues to get better. And we know this. If you've watched Giannis since the start of his career, you know he continues to get better. But where does it end with this guy? He just continues to add things to his game. We're going to discuss that. We are, of course, as we have every single night for the last few weeks, going to discuss where the East is at. We had a couple of interesting results from tonight's games. And then we'll talk about Bucks and Nets, which is going to be a big game, potentially a historic game for Giannis if he can drop 40 points. Let's get into
it. You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday and also find my work over at ESPN. And joining me for the second time this week, absolute workhorse from the Bucks Radio Network, Justin Garcia. And we're here to talk about the Bucks. We're here to talk about Giannis. And as always, we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen or first watch of every single day. I know I show a lot of love to the YouTube viewers just because it's new. We've only been doing YouTube for a few months. We're up to 2.7 subscribers last time I saw. Plenty of people watching the post-game show from the Sixers game. If you didn't see that or hear that, go back and watch or listen to that one. But we thank you for your support either way. And by the way, if you haven't subscribed yet to YouTube, jump on. Even if you're only watching one a week and you're listening on the audio podcast, hit subscribe. That helps us out. There's no doubt about that. But Justin, like I said, you're a workhorse. And I tell you who else is a workhorse. That's Giannis. And look, I haven't hidden the fact that there's been times this season where I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm in the slumber like the Milwaukee Bucks right now with this regular season. How do you get yourself up for how do you get yourself up to podcast after every regular season games when they've just won the title? But this morning I woke up, probably not a great habit, but like most people, you pick up your phone, you see what's going on. I'm on Twitter. And I came across this highlights package, which was from Swish Cultures, I believe, which does some videos, does some photography, all these types of things. And it was just a highlight package of this Giannis performance versus Philadelphia. And just watching, I mean, we all watched the game. We discussed it last night. But I just want to talk about Giannis specifically in the variety of ways that he scored in this game. If you watch this 50-second clip, he literally did absolutely everything. There's nothing that he didn't do in this game in ways that he scored the ball. And we know how dominant he's been. But just to see a package like that, 2 years ago, you're looking at a package like that, and it's from 30 games. And they're like, look at this. Giannis's game is really growing. He can do this. He can do that. He did it in one game. And it's not even that uncommon anymore. This guy is ridiculous. And I was pumped watching the highlights from this game yesterday because it was a special performance.
Yeah, this was like the perfect game for Giannis where you look at where his shots were coming from. He took, I think 3 threes in the game. His shot chart, there was a lot of the mid-range, and I know a lot of people have there's been more and more that has been written about and a lot on Twitter too about Giannis's efficiency in the mid-range and how it compares to other guys that have been pretty good in that area for a couple of years, and it's kind of under the radar. And, oh, by the way, Giannis is pretty comfortable in the mid-range, in the long mid-range, and with that turnaround. And we saw a lot of that against the Sixers, but his ability to finish at the rim, I forget what player they were discussing, but I was listening to one of the basketball shows that I listen to each morning, and it might have been Jason Tatum, where they talked about the differences between guys that it takes a little bit of time where you're a good player, but then you have to go to the next level and you have to put in the work. And Kobe Bryant was certainly one of those guys that figured it out. And all right, I can do this now, but I got to add more things to my game. And you notice the difference, especially when you're around it and you watch it as much as we do. You notice the difference between those players and the players that know what they're good at and they keep doing that. Giannis is clearly in the other category, but
Yes.
Games like yesterday against the Sixers are where you point to and you say, look, 2 years ago, as much as we didn't want to hear it at the time, Giannis wasn't good enough, and he was a flawed player where he had the ability to attack the basket and score around the rim and in the paint with ease. But if you went against a good defense and if you went against teams that had enough size, they could figure out how to slow him down and keep him away from the basket and, make him not the same guy the final 5 minutes of the game or even further out. And I mean, now to see Giannis against the Raptors in the conference finals, Giannis in the second round against the Heat, to what we saw in the last 2 rounds last year, or at least in the Nets series in the finals, and what we've seen throughout the regular season, like, it is amazing how much he has grown as a player and everything he's added to his game from that level to already be an MVP and as dominant as he was, but now say, I got to keep getting better and I got to round out my game to where he is fully in the conversation of, I think even last year, you would have the conversation of the best player in the world. And we all thought it was Giannis after game 6 of the finals where he scored 50 points. But even then, I think you still said, all right, I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment. This was great. But, if I have one game to win, I think everybody in Wisconsin is going to take Giannis. But I don't know. Would I take somebody else? What he's done this year and how we've seen the holes in his game have been plugged and he's added everything he has. It's him or Kevin Durant are clearly the 2 best players. Kevin Durant's still underrated defensively. Giannis is a better defender than Durant, but those are clearly the 2 best guys that you're saying in terms of their scoring ability. They're guaranteed 30 points a night basically, and their two-way play. These are the 2 best players in the league. And with Giannis, it's, well, I'm going to have him longer and he can do more on the defensive end, and that may give him the edge. But it's amazing to see what he's done and how he's continued to grow, even from an MVP to become now an all-time great.
And people that have listened to this podcast for a while, and certainly people that listened to yesterday's post-game show will know that I've got Nikola Jokic right up there as well. He dominates the game in a different way, and it's not as visible as the physical, overwhelming domination that Giannis provides.
He's the cerebral dominant guy.
It is, and it's sometimes I don't want to say it's harder to appreciate because everyone can see the passing and all the stuff that Jokic does, but he's just a very, very unique player. Giannis now is actually starting to transform into a guy that is more, and we'll see where it gets to with his shooting, but the way that, again, that he scored yesterday with the turnarounds from both shoulders, with the pull-up jump shots, with the three-point shot in transition, this is more the traditional. Now, of course, he's never going to be the should I say never? No, I'll say never. He's never going to be the shooter that Kevin Durant is, and I think we're all okay with that. But he brings a lot to the table that Kevin Durant doesn't. But when you look at that highlight package, you're like, okay, that's what Kevin Durant does. So he's actually now starting. He's got the physical stuff. He's been dominating for years and years and years. Now he's adding the more traditional, what we would call a modern-day superstar element to his game, that end-of-clock stuff. Frank's been talking about it a lot through the season, that Giannis has been really looking for his jump shot in fourth quarters in clutch moments. He's been looking for that kill shot with the jump shot. Now, I think we've described that as some of those shots as glamour shots. They look great. Isn't necessarily the highest percentage shot for Giannis right now in his game. Probably not. But as you pointed to, the difference between him and most other superstars is that he doesn't want to just stick to what he's comfortable with. He's fine going out there and missing a shot. And if he misses a shot, then he's going to continue working at it until he doesn't. There was a great thread on Twitter, and I don't have it up, but I'm sure you would have seen it, Justin. I'm sure a lot of our listeners and viewers have seen as well, regarding Giannis and the jump shot and that sort of step to the left, pull up jump shot, knock it down. And I didn't think about the sequence of the move, so this thread was more thoughtful than what was in my head. But when I was watching the game yesterday, I definitely thought about the discussion that we had after Giannis missed that game-winning opportunity, and there was a lot of, I guess, frustration or questions. Why would Giannis be the guy to take that shot towards the end of the game? I don't think for a second that Giannis ever thought in his head, why was our guy to take that shot? Because he probably believed that he should be taking that shot, and he probably believed that at some point in his career, that's going to be a relatively good shot for him to take. And we've seen it, that he knocked it down yesterday. I think he's hit big shots before late in games, but I do think that yesterday was probably the first time we saw multiple times in big situations where he just stepped up, knocked it down, and he's just like, hey, this is what I'm here to do. This is what I'm going to do.
Well, I think what was even kind of somewhat telling, but we've seen him in the spot before, and I don't remember which game it was in the playoffs last year. It may have been in the finals, but there was one of the games where the Bucks were winning, and you kind of kept passing the ball around. It gets in the hands of Giannis, and he found Chris immediately, and Chris hits the 2 free throws to extend the lead. Yesterday, the same thing happened, and Chris Middleton was wide open at half court, and Giannis kept it.
Yeah.
And, kept going and waited to get fouled. And even his reaction when he missed one of those free throws and how visibly upset he was. I mean, even that shows you different stages and how more confident he's gotten at the free throw line too, which the turnaround game and the mid-range game, all of that is nice. And he, to get to that next level, you do need to develop that game, because you need that type of shot in the playoffs, as we've seen the last couple of years and runs the Bucks have gone on. But to me, the free throws were always just as important as that. They were more important than the threes, and they may be the most important, because we know how defenses work in this league. And if you have a weak spot, teams are going to find it. And if Giannis is a 60% free throw shooter, as great as he is offensively, he's getting fouled every single time he touches the ball in the final 2 minutes of the game. So for him to even make that adjustment, and just we talked about his offensive growth, but the free throws, it feels like a light years difference from where it was last year and the last 2 years for that matter, even though he's only about 10% better at the line, somewhere around there. But it just feels like it's much, much different from him. And the way he reacted to missing a free throw, where in the past you could see he would kind of tighten up and he would start to look a little uncomfortable, but he wasn't going to shy away from going to the line. But how he was upset with missing that told me he expects to make those now every time he goes to the free throw line.
When you do what he did in Game 6 of the NBA Finals from the free throw line, how can you ever justify in your own mind ever missing the free throw again? I mean, he must just be thinking, I did this under the most pressure I could have possibly been under. How can I miss a free throw in a regular season game? But anyway, I got more on Giannis in a second, and we did have someone ask, we'll talk about NBA Top Shot. I did have someone ask yesterday on Twitter, would I put the block as an NBA Top Shot moment? I think so. I think that there would be people that would be interested in having that highlight, because that is one of the highlights from Giannis that we'll be talking about for a long time. An NBA Top Shot is the future of what being an NBA fan looks like. It's part trading cards, part stock market, part fantasy sports with a built-in loyalty program. NBA Top Shot has evolved trading cards and made it easy to buy, sell, and trade by removing the hassle of card grading, shoe boxes, and binders. I had a binder of Pokemon cards back when I was in high school, but their 24/7 peer-to-peer marketplace lets you scroll through all of your favorite players and teams. Once you find the moment you've been looking for, you can buy it in a couple of clicks. People will say, why would you buy something that you can watch on YouTube or for free? And I tell those people that it's not about watching a highlight. It's about having ownership in the stock market of NBA's greatest moments. If you sign up for Top Shot today, the best way to start is getting yourself a starter pack. You can pull a moment of a superstar like LeBron or KD, or star rookies like Kate Cunningham or Evan Mobley for $9. Head over to lockedon.nbatopshot.com to start building your collection today. Make sure you check out the Locked On Now podcast. Some interesting games tonight. You'll be able to get recaps from around the league. Boston and Miami was one game that I think people will have interest in for sure. So check out the Locked On Now podcast. I've got a friend who loves playing NBA 2K to the point where he's got a bit of a problem, or he used to have a problem. I think that he's gotten over the addiction, but he used to play the My Player version of the game, and he would have his own player, and he would send us a screenshot, and his player's averaging 60 points, 35 rebounds, 22 assists, and just absurd numbers like this. And I was thinking about Giannis today. I think Giannis might be the My Player of the NBA. He's always improving. Every year he improves. He brings something new to the table. He acquires new skills. And I was looking at his shooting percentages, and we mentioned them, but just to put them into context, his mid-range is up to 44%. It was at 38% last year. His free throw percentage has jumped from 68 to 72. His scoring has gone up. Now, last year was the first year in his career that the scoring actually went down, the scoring average per game, that is. Now he's up to 29.9, so we think that he's a pretty good chance to get to 30 points per game. Certainly Frank's hoping so. I believe it's 29.88 right now. His rebounding's gone up. His assists are about the same. His three-point percentage is fascinating. We're just at a weird point in the season. His three-point percentage hasn't necessarily gone anywhere. It's basically exactly the same, to the point where last year in the regular season, he was 67 for 221 from three. 67 for 221. This year, he's 68 for 226. It's almost identical. I mean, again, he's improved everywhere else. And we do think that as you evolve your shooting, his free throw improves, his mid-range improves, and you think that his three-point percentage has a decent chance of improving in coming years. So it's not really relevant to anything. I just think it's crazy that he's virtually exactly the same from the three-point line right now. But do you think it's a fair call to say that people will say it's video game-like, that Giannis is potentially actually just a 2K player in real life?
I think the most 2K player that there is right now would probably have to be Jose Alvarado.
Oh my goodness! By the way, before you get back to Giannis, and Jose Alvarado, if everyone doesn't know, or some people don't know, which is fair enough if you haven't quite caught up on this, but he plays for the New Orleans Pelicans, and he always hides near the bench, and then when a player inbounds the ball, he'll sneak around and steal the ball from him from behind. Incredibly annoying, but I love it. How do you feel about this? I mean, it's great.
It's great. A great value contract as well for the Pelicans. Yes. I'm sure they've broken it down on the Lockdown Pelicans. But yeah, I mean, Jose Alvarado, the first time I saw him, you thought, what is going on here? This is the player I would expect to see for the Thunder or a team like that. What Giannis is doing is, I don't know, almost Nikola Jokic at times seems like more of the video game. I got 15 assists with my center, back in the day when you would play 2K or NBA Live and just try to hunt triple doubles, and you would have Ben Wallace dishing out 20 assists. That's up there, but certainly Giannis too. He's the most fun to play with on 2K, he or Steph Curry. But yeah, I mean, he is like a video game come to life with those numbers. It's the same amount of games or one more game that he played compared to last year in the 72 game schedule. And I mean, it's just amazing to see how the numbers have continued to climb. And we were kind of talking about it before, but the first duration of the season, I mean, you had a month where Steph Curry was in the MVP discussion, and then he kind of started to cool off after he broke the 3-point record. But it's always been Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic were the constants. And, I had on one of the shows we did, I think it was around the midpoint of January, somebody pointed out, why is nobody mentioning Giannis too? His numbers are just as good. And I think this team is going to be a lot better in the second half. And if that happens, he's got a really strong case at the MVP. And at the time you thought, yeah, I mean, he's had his, that it's probably going to be a couple of years before Giannis wins it again, when it's just kind of hey, this guy's still good. We should recognize that. But now in hindsight, you look at everything. And as we talked about too, the game against the Sixers is what you present to the Academy of, okay, here's the scene I would like you to take into consideration for Best Actor. Here's why I'm the MVP. He was clearly the best player on the floor. He played like the best player in the league. Joel Embiid's comments too about how, Giannis was great, but he really went to work when I was off the floor. And as Frank pointed out, well, I mean, yeah, he did pick apart Paul Millsap, as it seems like everybody has this year, but Giannis was pretty good when you were on the floor as well. But it just the two-way play. And Embiid is great defensively as well. Giannis can obviously cover some more ground and can handle some perimeter players. And, the sequence as well, he got caught on James Harden a couple of times. Both of those guys seem to have a little bit extra in the tank whenever they match up against each other. But the sequence, I think it was Maxey in the fourth quarter that he got matched up on him and stayed with him and forced that rush shot and contested it. And it obviously didn't fall. I mean, it's stuff like that where you see, man, this guy really can do everything. And he's starting to get a little bit, it's probably too little too late now, but starting to get a little more attention there. But yeah, I mean, he's in that conversation with, I think, Nikola Jokic. And I think at this point, I think he's past Joel Embiid. It's been great what Embiid has done, but Giannis has been more impressive to me.
I think it's a two-man race. We kind of discussed that yesterday. And I do think I spent most of the season thinking that Giannis wouldn't be able to get the votes again because of the fatigue, because of the fact that he's already won a couple. When you do elevate a guy to a 3-time MVP, you're putting them into a different bracket, and people do take that seriously. Historically, you can argue whether that's fair or not, That's how I get. I don't have a vote, but that's how I get the feeling that people look at it. But I will say, now that I believe it's down to a 2-man race with Embiid and Giannis, I'm kind of turning where I think, okay, I
With
think
Embiid and Giannis or Jokic?
Jokic and Giannis. With Jokic and Giannis, now that I think that those are the two guys, I do think Giannis can win it, because I think out of those two guys, he's going to have the favor of the voters, and they'll look back at last year's postseason and everything he done. So I think he's right back in it. And I think for the first time this year, I'm thinking that Giannis can win the MVP.
And where it's going to be interesting now, it's going to be tough. And I think what Denver's done recently, I mean, they've played a little bit better of late. It's still going to be tough for the Timberwolves, especially with their loss. And they've kind of fallen back to earth a little bit here. But when they were at the streak they were on, it would have really opened the door if the Nuggets were still around, playing around 500, and the Timberwolves were on that hot streak and eventually caught them. But now you're seeing the Timberwolves and Jazz struggle. That's helped the Nuggets. So my point being, if Denver would have dropped into the play-in tournament, if you're telling me, well, this team won 48 games versus 49, so he should be penalized, that's ridiculous. But it's still something voters look at of, well, if he's the MVP, why is his team in the play-in tournament? So that was something I think that would have helped Giannis. I think, and we kind of mentioned this earlier, I think when you look at the results that have come out for these straw polls, I agree with you that Embiid is not going to win the MVP. That hey, we should recognize what Joel Embiid has done. It's been a nice story. It's impressive. He's gotten better. And, Philadelphia didn't have a great supporting cast early on. Guys did play better. So we should recognize that, but he's not going to win the MVP. I think a lot of voters are have been beaten over the head with, you don't understand how good Nikola Jokic has been. And now they're I feel like I have to vote for him now. And Giannis is that dark horse that's emerging. What you pointed out too, he does that against the Sixers. It's a national game against the Nets. If you do something like that again, it's a national game on Sunday against the Mavericks and Luka Doncic, which will have a lot of appeal, and Jason Kidd back in Milwaukee. And the big matchup against the Celtics. I think prior to last night, at least in the Eastern Conference, the three biggest games left this season were the Bucks and the Sixers. The Heat and the Celtics, who played tonight, was another big one. And the Bucks and the Celtics were probably the three huge remaining games in the Eastern Conference. And Giannis is going to be featured, at least we think, in two of those three games. So if he does stuff like he did last night, and not that he has to score 40 with, close to 20 rebounds, but if he makes those plays on both ends of the floor and the Bucks win, well, if the Bucks all of a sudden finish second or first in the Eastern Conference and Giannis is among the scoring leaders and maybe the scoring leader and putting up comparable numbers and making an impact defensively, it is going to be really hard not to justify him being the MVP over Nikola Jokic. And especially if you look at the scoring title for importance, I don't think this is going to happen, but I think it's 58 games that you need to play in to qualify. So LeBron James needs to play in, I think, 4 more games this season. I would assume he will, but with that ankle injury and with LeBron himself saying it's really bad, it is worth monitoring that, hey, LeBron's probably going to score more points than those two, but he might not qualify for the scoring title.
It wouldn't be like LeBron to be a little dramatic about things, would it, Justin? We wouldn't. That wouldn't shock anyone.
I mean, look at what the Lakers have done too. That's the interesting part is maybe he gets to like 57 games and the Lakers just keep losing, and the Spurs are all of a sudden a couple of games ahead of them where they realize it ain't happening. So I'm just going to shut things down.
We will see. But if you want to check out the MVP odds and also the odds and lines and props and everything you can get for this Bucks and Nets game, which we're about to get into here, then you can do that at betonline.net, because after months of playing, college basketball has determined the top teams for the Final Four, and you've got to check out the Final Four odds as well. The national championship coming up this week. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all the betting needs and sports info, from the latest odds, contests, and player props. You name it. BetOnline remains the best spot for the latest sports developments, including podcasts and reviews for all the leagues this season. And it's not just basketball. You can get all the different sports. I see the national team for U.S. soccer did something today. Shout out to you guys Welcome to the real world. Going to get into the World Cup or trying to get to the World Cup like football, soccer giants like Australia. But anyway, you can find all the live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games at betonline.net as well. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Bucks and Nets coming up here. A game that will have some implications in the standings, of course. First of all, in a yes or no question, is Giannis scoring at least 39 points here and making history at Barclays Center in Brooklyn for all the Milwaukee fans that are heading to the arena?
Yeah. So 39 would tie.
Yes.
No, and so he's going to break the record at home. The question is it going to be Friday or Sunday? Because we still don't know how you're going to treat this back-to-back. I think I feel pretty confident in saying the back-to-back they have next week, which is another Thursday, Friday. He's not playing in both of those games, and the second and third to last games of the season. He's not going to get to 39 or 40 to tie or break in Brooklyn tonight. But I think he's getting 30 again. So it'll be to the point where the next game he plays, it's going to be at home, and he's going to need 7 or 6 points to become the all-time leading scorer. So it's going to happen in the first quarter.
So the other thing that's really interesting for me heading into this game is the lineup stuff. So we know that obviously they made a starting lineup change in the game against Philadelphia. Wesley Matthews came in. Frank and myself discussed the idea of that just being the norm from now on, and will they stick with that moving forward? Now, I think the one thing that makes this interesting is the fact that the Nets are a little bit smaller. If they have Seth Curry starting at the 2, then it's like, okay, do you go back to Grayson Allen? I don't know whether they're going to do that. Do they just stick with the bigger lineup or the bigger, stronger guard in Wes Matthews? We've seen him, chase Steph Curry off the ball around, and maybe Bud puts Wes in that situation. I don't know. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way after the game, or like once we saw that Wesley Matthews was going to start at first. You're like, oh, okay, I guess they're doing this because of the way that Wes has defended James Harden in the past. But then kind of was like, we kind of talked about the Bobby thing earlier in the year too, of, well, do you consider starting Serge? And that'll kind of juice the bench scoring. And I think it's the same with Grayson Allen, where he doesn't seem to be affected or impacted by coming off the bench or starting. And he's going to get more offensive opportunities coming off the bench than he would playing with that group. The benefit is if you play alongside Giannis, you're going to get the open looks that he has from the outside. But, we've seen Grayson being able to do more than just shoot. So I think he would be a pretty effective bench scorer for the team. And, just knowing how much Bud loves offense or defense, excuse me, and Wesley Matthews and George Hill specifically and what they bring, I do kind of think that this is going to be the starting lineup moving forward, especially since you don't want to keep jumping back and forth. And Bud himself has talked about that you don't want to have, unless there's injuries coming into play, what they went through in November and December and parts of February, where it's a different lineup every 3 games. So I do think, and he's, I think, used the exact words too, you like to find what works and stick with it. I think that means Wesley Matthews is going to be starting in the backcourt next to Drew from here on out.
And the timing wasn't lost on me for bringing Wes Matthews into the starting lineup. We saw earlier in the season he had some time on Kevin Durant as well, and also did a decent job. So I think that, regardless of how the listeners feel about it, I know Wesley Matthews can be a bit of a guy that fans either like or they don't like so much. But he has been versatile in terms of guarding the smaller guys, guarding the bigger guys, and I don't think it's a coincidence that West came in. So my bet would be that he stays in the lineup. My bet would be that he probably starts guarding Kevin Durant. That's probably how I see this playing out. And then they can shuffle things around. I mean, we saw last night that, again, we discussed Matisse Thybulle, but is there a guy, is a Giannis on Bruce Brown the option because they feel like they can leave him out there and not have to worry too much about him? I'll be curious to see the matchups, but if I had to guess, I think you got Drew on Kyrie, Chris Middleton chasing around Seth Curry as he has Duncan Robinson in the past. Giannis is trying to ignore Bruce Brown and be the roamer, Wesley Matthews on KD. I think that's the way it's going to play out.
Yeah, that's exactly how I see it too. In both teams, the initial injury report that came out earlier tonight, there's no issues. The Bucks, it's Giannis that's listed, but he's probable once again. And for the Nets, it's just Ben Simmons is out in terms of their regulars and Joe Harris. So it's going to be 2 straight games against 2 teams that have been playing pretty well, and you're going to see the regulars. You're going to see all the stars in the game. So it's going to feel like a playoff game once again. And, the rotation that we saw too, not just starting Wesley Matthews, but the minutes that we saw from everybody that played in the game, it felt like a playoff game and what you can expect to see. I think the biggest difference would be Pat Connaughton played a little under 20 minutes. I would anticipate that's going to be 25 plus, closer to 30 in the postseason. But the way everything else was handled, Serge Ibaka was kind of the insurance when Brook ran into foul trouble. I think that's his role with this team. Grayson Allen, 25 minutes, probably going to be closer to 20 in the playoffs, maybe less. But Bobby Portis, what you saw from him, and George Hill, I think that's what you expect to see in the playoffs. And for all the Javon Carter stands, I mean, we love him too. But as we said, Bud loves defense, and Bud trusts Wesley Matthews and George Hill. So unless something happens or foul trouble or an injury, as good as Javon Carter has been and the boost that he's brought them, it's going to be tough for Javon Carter to find minutes once you get past the first round of the playoffs.
Totally agree. Now, everyone should also check out the Locked On NBA podcast, the national podcast. You can get all the news stuff. I'm sure they'll be talking Bucks and Nets after this game, or previewing Bucks and Nets. I'm sure they'll be into it. Make sure you check it out after you're done with Locked On Bucks. Justin, let's wrap it up. So potentially a big night for the history of the Milwaukee Bucks. We'll see. Of course, you want to win the game first, but we know Giannis, if he's anywhere around the high 20s heading into the fourth quarter and it's a close game, based on what we've seen all season long, I think people will be starting to think that it's very much within reach.
Well, what if, and under this scenario, it's not a close game. The Bucks are ahead comfortably, but Giannis is at 38 points for the game and he gets fouled and goes to the line. You have to miss both, right? So you can break the record at home in front of the Milwaukee fans.
Yeah, I mean, typically I think that Bud and everyone is aware in a game statistically where he's at for a triple-double. I'm not 100% sure. Giannis probably knows. He probably knows. I mean, he would never admit that he knows, but he probably knows where he's at. I don't know if Bud does. I don't know if Bud's keeping track of the franchise scoring lead. Maybe he is. Maybe I should give him more credit.
Well, Thanasis definitely knows, and people have been in communication with Thanasis, and he's the one that's telling Giannis when he comes to the bench, like, hey, you're 4 points away.
Well, I mean, Thanasis, that's exactly what we expect from him on the bench. He's in tune with everything going on with his team, not just Giannis. So we'll see. Nick Monroe, our friend, I know that he will absolutely have the social media content ready to roll if it happens tomorrow night. But we'll see. If not, it'll happen at home, which everyone's going to be excited about as well. But it's going to be a fun couple of days. We'll be back after Bucks and Nets tomorrow. Make sure you check out that post-game pod. But for now, for Justin and myself, we'll leave it there. Catch you guys tomorrow.